All right, next up in our preview is the Carolina Panthers. So Dave Canales right now entering his second season as the Panthers head coach. They were 5-12 last year, which is actually an improvement off the 2-15 record they had in 2023. We gave them for their offseason an A+ for their draft, a phenomenal draft for Carolina. We'll talk about that in just a second, but also a B for free agency too. So a very good offseason for the Carolina Panthers. Who are looking to make a jump in Bryce Young's year 3 in Carolina. What is the biggest strength, Dalton, of this Panthers team right now?
So I'm going to kind of repeat myself here as what I did with Atlanta. Now it's not quite as elite as the Falcons' offensive line, but Carolina last offseason spent a lot of resources fixing up their offensive line, getting 2 new guards in Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. They've got Austin Corbett. They just named the starting center. And then Ike Ekwonu and Taylor Moton at tackle. I think it's really one of the more underrated offensive lines in the NFL. They played a lot better last year. Bryce Young was allowed to be comfortable. And for as much as we've talked about Bryce Young and the wide receivers this offseason, this is a solid rushing football team too, with Chuba Hubbard in the backfield. Now they've signed Rico Dowdle as a second guy, Trevor Etienne in the draft as a third guy, and maybe a guy who can take some pass catching work. So I think this offensive line, as they really started to gel into the second half of last year, really was a big reason that this offense as a whole got better. It's a unit that we really shouldn't forget about. They might not have a lot of household names, but to me, they're a borderline top 10 offensive line in the NFL, and they really make things go for this offense.
Yeah, we ranked them the 11th best offensive line in the league. So, yeah, really borderline top 10 right now. Now, the question mark is defensive front, so the kind of the front 7 for Carolina. But there is some hope for that front 7 because I mentioned the draft before. I love the strategy the Panthers had in the draft of not taking an edge rusher at number 8 like everyone thought they would. They took Tedero McMillan, we'll talk about later. But then they got Princely Monmielen and Nick Scorton, who a lot of people had both of them as potential first-round picks in last year's draft. I thought Scorton was a first-round caliber player in last year's draft. So you got 2 great players on day 2 of the NFL draft to help out that defensive line. You also get back Derek Brown, who's a top 10 D tackle in the league, back from an injury because he barely played at all last year. Their biggest weakness might be at linebacker. Right now, Christian Roseboom and Trevin Wallace are right now projected to start at linebacker. But again, that defensive line that really, really struggled last year at least has hope for the future with the return of Derek Brown and a few rookies coming in Princely Monmielen, Nick Scorton, and Cameron Jackson.
Yeah, Derek Brown is as important an addition to any team considering the Panthers' weakness, that they have in run defense in football. 2 years ago, he was the second highest graded defensive tackle in run defense behind Quinnen Williams. And then again, you talked about it, Monmielen, Scorton, Cam Jackson. This is a team also that was last in the league in pass rush grade. They were basically last in the league in any defensive category last year. So this offseason, they really focused on the defensive line. They re-signed J.C. Horn to an extension. They signed Mike Jackson on the other side across, who had a pretty good year. I think drafting even Lathan Ransom at safety, Trayvon Merrick at safety is going to help them. So I think, everything, that linebacker spot is the biggest question for me. But if they get major improvements along this defensive line, I think their defense could be a lot better.
All right, so tell me more about Bryce Young, who everyone thought he was going to be an outright bust in Carolina. The number 1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, had a shaky rookie year, and he looked terrible in the first 2 games of 2024. He got benched for Andy Dalton and then came back in when Dalton got hurt, and he looked really good in the second half of the season. So now there's actually hope for Bryce Young heading into year 3.
We just saw, I think, the Dave Canales effect on Bryce Young. It's what I was hoping for. It took some time, obviously, 2 bad games, and then a benching, and then obviously Andy Dalton gets hurt in a car accident, and Bryce Young is back in action. But from weeks 9 through 18 last year, he had the 6th best passing grade in the NFL and the 2nd most big-time throws, 24 big-time throws from weeks 9 to 18. And what you saw from Bryce Young was just that old confidence, that old Alabama confidence that he had, right, to try to throw balls into tight windows down the field from within the pocket, to make plays outside the pocket. We even saw it last week in their preseason game against Cleveland, his ability to make throws into tight windows and then make plays outside the pocket. This confident version of Bryce Young, from what we've seen so far, doesn't look like it's going away, and that's the best thing they could have done. Dave Canales needed to instill confidence in Bryce Young because he had lost that in his rookie season. It was a disaster when it came to the coaching staff, the offensive line, everything really as a whole in that offense was a mess. You see it starting to come together. You see Dave Canales' vision for Bryce Young coming together. And the one thing I want to see now with a better receiving core, all of a sudden you look at this wide receiver unit, you go, okay, Tedero McMillan, Adam Thielen is reliable. Jalen Coker, I think, is an emerging playmaker for them. We'll see what they can find at tight end. Maybe somebody like Jatavian Sanders, right? But
maybe I think Xavier
Legette, last year's first-round pick, if he can get over some of the drop issues, he's another guy who can get vertical. Bryce Young clearly wants to throw the ball vertically down the field. The Panthers are doing a nice job of surrounding him with weapons that are able to do that. And I think the biggest thing for me on a week-to-week basis, the second half of last year, you saw confidence.
Yes.
Fearlessness from Bryce Young. Just be willing. He was the highest graded passer in that stretch, throwing into tight windows. And that's with the lowest graded receiving core in the league. Bryce Young, if he continues playing the way he did the second half of last year, gives Carolina a lot of hope.
And because his play style is completely reliant on confidence, because really the way he wins is with his mind. He is an excellent processor who makes the right reads. He redirects receivers' routes mid-play. You even saw in the preseason game with a touchdown pass to Jalen Coker. That's what made him special at Alabama. And when you're in the NFL and he wasn't confident, he doesn't have a huge arm. He doesn't have a huge size or great mobility. So when you don't have confidence in that kind of play style, that's where you see Bryce Young look like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. But when he came back in, he found that confidence again, and that's what made him special to Alabama. That's what made him special in the second half of last season and why he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over the second half of last season. One of his star players on that offense comes from that offensive line, and Taylor Moton, his right tackle. He's been the right tackle for Carolina over the last 7 years, and he played some of his best football last year for the Panthers. 77.7 PFF grade, his highest PFF grade since 2020, and he only allowed 1 sack. That's the third time in the last 4 years he only gave up 1 sack in the entire season. Since 2018, he has an 84.9 pass blocking grade, and he's only allowed a hit or a sack on 0.6% of his pass blocking snaps. So I mentioned before, Bryce Young looked really confident back there in that pocket. A big reason for that, he's got an outstanding right tackle blocking for him and Taylor Moton.
Really an underappreciated player for a long time, a really good veteran right tackle. Right tackles are people too, Max. And I think even in years when Carolina's offensive line as a unit was struggling, it wasn't Taylor Moton. He's been a constant on this team for a long time. And with the younger piece on the other side, and Ike Ekwonu at left tackle, and then the veteran additions at guard, again, this is a very, very solid offensive line, but Moton's been the one constant there for a long time.
So one guy who barely played at all last year, Dalton, was Derek Brown before going down with a season-ending injury. I believe he only played in one game. One game last year. But when he's on the field, Derek Brown, former top 10 pick, is one of the best D tackles in the league.
Yeah, and I think you just saw last year, it's almost like you saw how good he was when he wasn't on the field, because just all of the sudden, when he got hurt, he suffered that season-ending knee injury. Carolina's run defense was historically bad. I believe they were just the 4th team in NFL history to give up 3,000 rushing yards in a season. I mean, just ridiculous. By far the lowest graded team in run defense in the league. Obviously not much pass rush push either, but Derek Brown was second in the NFL, like I mentioned before, behind Quinnen Williams in run defense grade in 2023. He's the type of defensive tackle. I talk about it all the time with guys like this. They make the rest of the front seven better. He demands double teams. He penetrates gaps. He holds up well. Everything that you want out of an interior run defender, especially, Derek Brown has it. As much as they've added a million external pieces on this defense, the most important one being added to this defense is Derek Brown at defensive tackle. He's the guy who's going to make everything happen in the middle. He needs to make it a lot harder. If he looks anything like he did in 2023, he's going to make it a lot harder for opponents to run the ball on him, and now Carolina can start to control the pace of the game because they couldn't do that last year.
The Panthers had the worst pass rush grade in the NFL last year and the worst run defense grade in the NFL last year, a 37.5 team run defense grade. That was 10.5 points lower than any other team in the NFL, and it was the worst run defense grade by any team over the last 2 seasons in the NFL too. So you're right, it was really, really bad for Carolina in run defense, but now you add back one of the best run defending D tackles in the NFL in Derek Brown, who's a pretty good pass rusher too. He's going to help out that defensive line a lot in 2025. The rookie to watch is their top 10 pick at wide receiver in Teteroa McMillan. In my opinion, he was the best wide receiver prospect in the 2025 NFL draft. Over the last 2 years, a 98.6 receiving grade on 10-plus yard targets. That led all receivers in the country. He's 6'5". He's outstanding, obviously, in contested catch situations. He moves better than you expect for someone that size. My comparison for him was Drake London coming out. We talked about him before with the Falcons. So you might have another Drake London type of player in the NFC South. And what I loved about Teteroa McMillan last year, Dalton, he had the second most broken tackles after the catch in America last year. The only one who had more was Luther Burden III, who's drawn a lot of comparisons to Deebo Samuel, right? So you're talking about a guy who's known for his yards after the catch ability in Luther Burden. He was the only receiver in America who had more broken tackles than Teteroa McMillan. You should not see 6'5" receivers breaking as many tackles as McMillan last year. He, I think, is your prototypical X receiver.
Absolutely. When you talk about the ability that he has, I think there's 3 areas. We went over this in a film breakdown earlier in the offseason. You saw 2 of them already in the preseason game when Bryce Young was starting him. 1, the go balls. Yeah. I think anytime Teteroa McMillan's in press man, you're going to see him getting a shot vertically downfield, and he's going to win a lot of those battles. 2, in breakers. I think as a big receiver, you think about the way that Dave Canales used Mike Evans in Tampa Bay, in breaking routes. And then 3, the red zone threat. And actually, he got all 3 of those in one drive in the preseason game. He just dropped the red zone slant. But I think in all 3 of those areas, and those are the areas where Bryce Young really got better at throwing into the second half of last year. McMillan, it's not that I just like the McMillan pick. This was my favorite pick of the first round, okay? Not just because it's Teteroa McMillan and he's awesome, right? It's because it set up the rest of the draft. Yes. They didn't need a weapon. They needed the weapon. Teteroa McMillan has the ability to be the weapon in this offense, and it set him up to take a bunch of defensive players later in the draft. Just a spectacular draft strategy for Carolina, and McMillan could easily be their number 1 receiver right away.
And Dave Canales was the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers in 2023, and Dalton, your comparison you always made for Teteroa McMillan was Mike Evans.
Yeah.
So Dave Canales might have watched that tape and said, hey, I can get another Mike Evans in here.
He does not move like a normal 6'5" receiver. Yeah. He's a different animal, man. I know we saw him drop a couple passes in the first preseason game, but he doesn't drop balls very often either. He's really the full package, I'm telling you.
I saw people clowning McMillan for dropping that pass in the end zone in the preseason. Yes, it was his fault for not turning around quicker enough, but it just felt to me, remember when Jamar Chase dropped his first target of his career in preseason? He actually dropped a lot in preseason that rookie year, and everyone was like, oh, Jamar Chase is going to be a bust, and then he had one of the greatest rookie years we've ever seen for a receiver. And then it's kind of like go to a college game. Jeremiah Smith dropped his first ever target, and everyone's like, oh, highest rated receiver ever, huh? This is what he's going to be, and now he's the best player in the country.
Yeah.
Just let's give it some time before we start panicking.
Yeah, I mean, first game, he made 2 spectacular plays right before that, so I'm not worried about McMillan at all. And again, I think he's just the perfect fit for this offense and what Bryce Young is trying to do in this offense.
Well, McMillan is a major reason why our best bet of the year, according to Ben Lindsay, is Bryce Young over 18.5 passing touchdowns at -102 right now on FanDuel Sportsbook. Ben says from week 10 through the end of the regular season, he was 5th in the NFL. Bryce Young was in passing grade, and he had 12 passing touchdowns in the final second half of the season. Carolina's defense should be somewhat improved, but they'll still be in situations where they need to pass the ball a lot. And the Panthers, like we mentioned before, got a wide receiver 1 in Teteroa McMillan. Right now, we project Bryce Young to have 20.6 passing touchdowns, which is 2 more than that line right there. So I like that bet a lot too. Basically get minus 100 odds on over 18.5 when we think Bryce Young will have 20.5, if not more, passing touchdowns this year. That's a very good line right there for Bryce Young.
Absolutely. I think when you think about it, just on the surface, all 15 of his passing touchdowns last year were week 8 or later. He basically went half the season without throwing a touchdown. Obviously, he was benched for a handful of those games, but you still go, okay, that's a pretty good number right there just from week 8 to 18, right? And then you go, okay, they've added Teteroa McMillan. You hopefully get better Xavier Legette, better Jalen Coker, better just all around on the offense. And if the defense improves and gives you even more chances, I think here's the thing about it too, is a two-way go on this, because if the Panthers are good, it's probably it's going to be because Bryce Young is really good, yep. Right? And if they're not good, to me it's probably more so because of their defense, yes. And they can't make stops, and Bryce is behind and he's still slinging. Yeah. So I think if he plays all 17 games, And this receiving core and the way that we saw him play the second half of last year, if we see anything even close to that, I think 20 touchdowns is very attainable.
18 and a half passing touchdowns. If he plays all 17 games, that's basically averaging 1 touchdown a game and then throwing 2 touchdowns in 2 games. That's it. That's all you need to get over that.
And the teams in your division, the 3 teams in their division they're playing 6 games against, not great pass defenses, right? Yeah. Atlanta with very little pass rush, and Bryce shredded them in Week 18. New Orleans, obviously, we're about to get into their defense. It's not great. And even Tampa Bay, their pass defense was shaky last year, especially over the middle of the field. We'll go over. So, I mean, you've got some games here where you can rack them up a little bit. And again, just what we saw the second half of last year, that's a guy who should easily clear that number.
So after going 5-12 last year, the win total, according to DraftKings Sportsbook for the Panthers, is set at 6.5 right now, basically. You're going over or under for Carolina. What's the bottom line for the Panthers?
6.5.
I'm going to go over, actually.
I think I like over. I don't know that their defense is good enough yet to really make a playoff push.
I don't think so either.
Unless Bryce – I mean, here's the thing. Bryce, the way he played the second half of last year, when you talk about the 6th best passing grade in football, I mean, you get up there with guys like Burrow and Lamar and Allen and Mahomes, Jaden, Herbert, like the elite guys in the NFL, right? So it's like if he were to put together – the 6th best passing grade in football for an entire season, which is actually what Baker Mayfield did last year and won the division, you go, oh, that's okay. Now we're really onto something. Maybe a playoff push is in there. I think I'll take the over also. I'm really optimistic with this team and the direction they're going. I do think they might need one more offseason to just add more pieces to this defense. But I love the McMillan drafting. I really like where their weapons are going. If we get a better version of Xavier Legette, because he had some drop issues last year, then I think your offense gets really dynamic. They've got 2, if not 3 good running backs. I think this offense is at least, because we saw last year even, they were close to clearing that number last year. Tight game against Philly that they lost on a Xavier Legette drop, right? There was a couple other, they took the Chiefs down to the wire, right? Down all the way. The Chiefs had to kick a game-winning field goal at the end.
Those are 2 Super Bowl teams right there.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
This is how well Bryce Young was playing, is he had the Panthers with the worst defense in football in games with the Chiefs and the Eagles. And they really, especially the Philadelphia game, they should have won that game. I mean, Legette catches that ball, they're going to win that game. I'll take the over. I don't know that I'm confident enough to pick them as a playoff team to get closer to that 9-10 win range, but this is a competitive team that I think is getting better, and I love the Dave Canales hire last offseason. I think you're really starting to see his imprint on this team.
I'm going to go over 2. I think this is probably a 7-10, 8-9 football team. I'd be a little surprised if they go over 500 this year, but if Bryce Young, if that kind of development we saw in the second half of 2024 carries over into all of 2025, they could surprise some people and maybe win the NFC South in 2025. But with the defense still kind of improving, I like the additions they made this offseason. And, of course, getting Derek Brown back from injury is huge, too. If Nick Scorton can live up to the hype that he had coming out of college, if Pritzley Monmielen could be a really good pass rusher for them, too, then, yeah, it could change a lot. But I think, like Dalton said, give it a year. Give it one more year. But I do expect improvement off the 5-12 record. Like we saw improvement from last year's record from what was 2-15 in 2023. But I don't think it'll be enough to make the playoffs in 2025 or even go above 500 for that matter